Okay, ready to go when you are.
All right, so we're gonna call the meeting to order. It is now 7:06. Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Mayor Richardson. Councilmember Wilcoxen.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Present.
Councilmember Somerville.
Present.
Councilmember Morgan.
Present. Present.
Councilmember Simmons.
Present.
Mr. Jones Chance.
Present.
With 6 present, there is a quorum.
Excuse the mayor.
Move to excuse the mayor. Support.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
And I know Councilmember Simmons will be in the second one. All right, can you please rise for the pledge of allegiance if you're able? And a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Take a motion to approve the agenda. So moved.
Support.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any additions, corrections, or are we all good?
Looks like we're on.
All right, all in favor of the agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right, wonderful. This is our opportunity for public comment. You will have 3 minutes to address council, whether virtually or in person. And if there's anyone signed up, we'll start inside of chambers and then we'll move to the virtual part.
Nothing on the list.
All right, any of our audience members want to address council, or are you here for the session? Okay. Are there any individuals on Zoom who would like to address council? Nope, all right, going once, going twice. And we will move on to our work session. So again, good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. Hopefully we can get through this. It's painless. City manager, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me start.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Brown McGee. Gotta get that name right. Good afternoon, council, and to our audience. We are here today. This is a reaction to one of our goals that we adopted back in February. One of them was to look into having a Parks and Recreation department. So we took that, and since it is budget time, we took the opportunity to research to see what that actually looks like. And then we want to take the opportunity tonight to hear from you of what that looks like. And so tonight I have with me our Fiscal Services Director, Reagan Basabica, our Public Services Director, Ron Akers, and our project engineer. She does a lot of things, Bonnie Wessler here. And we're gonna present, first Reagan is gonna come giving you the foundation, sort of just giving you an idea of our fiscal health, where we are. So that once you hear these things, you can kind of make a decision if this is a priority still, or if we can do this in a way that doesn't require money. Could be just refiguring, rearranging some things internally. So at this time, Reagan is going to come first with the city's fiscal health. Then Bonnie will be after him, and then Mr. Akers. So I think we can ask questions as we go along, but hopefully at the end of each presentation, we can take questions at that time. We prefer. Thank you.
Good evening, Council, and good evening, everyone. So this is a brief overview of where the city stands financially. So what I'm going to present here is our beginning fund balance as of 2021. The breakdown of that fund balance, the projected budget surplus and shortfall for the upcoming years, And we'll touch a little bit on our ARPA funds and our recommendation on how we're gonna use those funds. So on this chart right here, where we are looking at our fund balance as of June 30, 2021. This has been already audited by our external auditors. And if you look at the chart right there, the city has 9.4 million, which is up from 8.3 million prior year. We had a surplus of 1.1 million, which is mainly for because of vacant positions. We had lower contractual services and operating expenses. As you can see on this chart, since 2015, in 2014, 2015, there was a big drop in our fund balance. That was due to a payment of the Water Street debt. But then after that, we've been slowly building up our fund balance to where we are right now. Okay. So here is the breakdown of our fund balance, because as we all know, not all of our fund balance is available for us to use. So I've broken this down, and as you can see, we have non-spendable 273,000, which is which accounts for our inventory, land force, resale, and our supplies. Also, the council has committed some of these funds to different areas, like our active employees cumulative benefits, which is 927,000. This is for the sick and vacation payouts to our employees. We've also committed energy efficiency and conservation project, 507,000, and we still have committed our 2 million to the train stop. So our unassigned fund balance as of now is the 5.7 million, which is available for use.
Hold on 1 second. There's an issue with the screen sharing. I just got notified.
Shouldn't it be a 500,000 for the Dam? That's
We've removed that because that's now part of the fiscal year's budget, the next year's budget. We'll be using those funds.
What's the difference between that category and the train stuff? Why?
So the train stop, we have not, we're not using that fund yet. It's still committed. The PENDA, we now have a project for that, so that will not be taken out of the assigned fund.
You go ahead.
Next slide, please.
It's not letting me do something. Oh, there we go.
Okay, so we have a 5.7 million in unassigned fund balance, which is available for use. But GFOA recommends that at the minimum, we should have at least 2 months of fund balance of 2 months of our regular operating expenditure. And I did take a look at the average of our operating expenditure for the next 3 years, and it's around 17.5 million, which means we should have at least 2.9 million in unassigned fund balance for our rainy day funds. So we have 2.8 basically to spend. And so this table shows us the beginning fund balance and our projected budget for fiscal year 21-22 up to 23-24. So for 21-22, we are looking at a shortfall of 686,000. And for 22-23, a shortfall of 1.5 million. And 23-24, a shortfall of 375,000, which puts us at 3.1 million, still a little over than the minimum recommended by GFOA. So also included in the projections are already our ARPA funds. So the city did receive 1.059 million, 1,059,000 in fiscal year 22, and we're expecting another 1 million for fiscal 23. So the final ruling have been sent out by the federal government regarding this, and the allowable uses now are to replace lost public revenue. So for municipalities that have received 10 million, you could use it to expenditures where you usually spend your money. And you could also use it to support COVID-19 public health and economic response. You could use it to provide premium pay for eligible workers performing essential work. And we can use it to invest in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. And our recommended use for this one is use it to replace lost public revenue in fiscal year 22 and 22-23 and fiscal year 23-24 to reduce our shortfall in those budget years and maintain a healthy minimum as an unassigned fund. Yes, thank you. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Basadito. Questions from council? Councilmember Somerville.
Quick question about the projected budget for the next, well, I guess for this year and the next year. Last year, we increased the YPD budget. And to my knowledge, we have not replaced or used the allocated amount to hire new officers. Is that correct? If we, at the coming year budget, if we go back to our original YPD budget from last year, how much of an impact do you think that would have?
I would have to look into that. I could give you a report and calculation.
Okay.
So to remove the additional officers.
Well, right now, we're in a 6 officer deficit, right?
Yes,
And we have been
because
since last year.
Right.
Yeah, I'd be curious what that would look like. If we,
Currently, I think per officer, we are spending around 100,000.
okay.
Councilmember Somerville, that's a great question. And I was thinking that for like every expenditure, we probably should be looking for a replacement. And like if we were to add another FTE, whatever, for some reason, my suggestion would be to pull a police officer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Bassett. I just want to ask a question. At the very beginning, you mentioned 3 things, vacant positions, lower operating expenses, and what was the third thing you mentioned?
Contractual service.
Okay, the money will stay unassigned as long as the positions are vacant.
Yes.
And with the projection, so we, like you said, currently we have enough money to cover the shortfalls for the next few years. And do we know how much per position, how many positions are vacant? And how quickly would it change the budget if we were to hire someone in the next few months?
So those are already included in the budget. So if we don't spend them, that becomes now a savings on the part of the city.
Any further questions, Councilmember Morgan?
No, thank you.
Councilmember Wilcoxen.
In the first slide, you said we had 9.4 million. That didn't include the ARPA money.
No, not yet.
So that's on the, okay.
But then on the projected shortfall, we've already included 1 million on fiscal year 22-23 and 23-24. So
So it's all of it.
so on both years. So
So the shortfall in that table,
it's on 22-23, it's 1.5 million, and then 375 the following year using the ARPA funds.
okay, so on page 7 of 132, that's already accounted that you put $1 million into that.
Yes.
Councilman Wilcoxon?
Yeah.
Okay. Any additional questions?
I just wanted to ask, I just want to ask, I see the recommendation to replace lost public revenue, but on the last thing, it said we can invest in water, sewer, broadband infrastructure. None of those things in the city right now are more dire, or there are no projects going on that money could directly benefit as opposed to just saving it.
So I think that will be up for discussion during the budget. So
Okay.
we're just recommending
Okay,
for us to use that for now.
okay,
But we will be submitting the management proposal budget by May 1st. Then after that, council will have the opportunity to review our proposal.
thank you, Mr. Masby.
Oh, Councilmember Somerville and then Mr. Jones.
I have a question about one of the recommended uses. What do you mean by expand broadband?
Yes, Andrew is the expert in the ARPA.
No, yeah.
One of
Yeah.
the areas that.
Just generally,
Mhm.
but like. we
That's one of the
would-
4 categories.
Okay. But these aren't the only things that were allowable for ARPA.
Yes, so basically on the first one, when you use it as your for lost revenue, you now are able to allocate it to wherever we like to prioritize those money. So like the first, the second and the fourth, it's more restricted, but when you use it, when you use it as a lost revenue, then you're freeing up the money and you could use it for whatever projects. So you feel like it's important.
Okay, I see. So this is just all straight from the, like the broad allowed uses.
From the root.
I guess when I was listening to Anthony ask, I was thinking like these were suggestions from staff, and I was just like, why would we be utilizing our resources to expand broadband? But thank you. Never mind.
Mr. Jones Chin.
Yeah, in your opinion, Mr. Basaviga, what is a healthy unassigned fund balance?
I think what we should follow what Jeff Owen is recommending. We should have at least 2 months, 2 to 3 months is highly recommended.
So we're a little over that now.
Yes, our charter says that I think we should have only at least minimum fund balance of 10%. But then JFOA now with is recommending at least 2 months, 2 to 3 months.
Okay, so we're pretty healthy as far as the unassigned fund balance goes.
Currently, but then looking at the projections, if we are, it will be 3.1, which is close now.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Morgan. Sure.
My very last question. What does it say? Like, if we had about a 15 million in our fund balance, is that a healthy thing? Is it having too much? Does it say that we don't allocate it well, we don't spend it well, or does it say that we just have a surplus that for rainy days? Like, how much is too much?
That's
There's no two.
Okay, I just want to know, like, if we had 30 million, like, the more we get, is this better to have, or does it say that we're not using it for the other uses that it could be used for?
we don't want to be keeping too much.
Okay.
Because we have to prioritize also some of our projects. So yeah, we have to keep a minimum, but we don't want to be keeping too much.
So what's that high ceiling? It says like 2 months is the basic, like 6 months, is that like the ceiling, like what's 20 million, like what is, I mean, this is a shot in the dark.
Because it depends on our, if we're looking into like big capital projects, so we would like also to be saving up for those big capital projects.
Okay.
So for now, if we could add more, I think that would be better for us.
Thank you for the recommendation. You're one of the best finance people that we have, so I trust you. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Wilcoxon.
I just have a question about the first chart. You've got the minimum unassigned fund balance at right over $1 million, but in the text or another thing, it says it should be 2.9 million.
Yeah, so that's the red line there. It's our, based on our charter, which is the 10%.
Ah,
But GFOA recommends more than what our charter says, so.
yes.
You know. Thank you, Mr. Vasilika. Do we have any additional questions before he moves to his seat? We appreciate you. Thank you so much for everything you do for us. Seriously.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to say, I want to thank Reagan for that presentation. And I want to thank you for allowing us to put this in at this juncture, because really it was supposed to be about parks, but I thought in order for us to really focus on the goals and the direction that we would take, we needed to set a framework so that we actually see where we are. And with our last budget seasons, we did more expenditures. And so now we need to be conscious that when we do spend, in order for us to stay healthy, we should start looking for areas maybe to take something back. And I just kind of want to keep that in our minds as we move forward. I would prefer it to come from you guys, but if it doesn't and you only give us expenditures, we will bring some of those things back, because it's our job to keep us healthy. So we may bring some of those potential cuts back.
I appreciate your foresight in just deciding to put that in there, because I do think we have some lofty dreams, right? We have to be realistic about what we can do, what we can't. So thank you.
Right. So at this time, our Public Services Director, Ron Akers, is coming to give, oh, I'm sorry, Bonnie. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Hey, Bonnie.
I'm not a good little seat.
No, she's good. We're just confusing. So this is more background. This is basically a memo in the form of a PowerPoint. So I'm going to be hitting the high points on each slide because there are many. So I'm going to be giving you sort of an overview of the cast of characters and funding, why we're here and what we've talked about in the past, and then what we've focused on in the years since we've really seen a comprehensive parks presentation to council. So next slide and next slide, please. So first in our cast of characters is the Parks and Recreation Commission. So the Parks and Recreation Commission is actually led by this gentleman right here, Mr. Evan Sweets. The commission is appointed by City Council, and their duty is to advise City Council on everything related to Parks and Recreation within the city. They also execute and help to draft and adopt the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. They oversee the Adopt a Park process, and they meet monthly. It is all volunteers. Next. So the staff that are involved in Parks and Recreation is basically everybody within the city. So the Department of Public Services, we oversee the maintenance of the parks. We often coordinate the volunteers and a lot of the donations that come to parks. So if somebody wants to plant a tree or make a bench, they would give us a call. If they want to clean up a park, they would give us a call as well. We also help with the capital improvements, oftentimes writing grants, but usually overseeing the actual installation of capital improvements. The Community and Economic Development Department also does some of that work. So in this past couple of years, they've overseen grants for playgrounds in both Riverside Park as well as Park Ridge Park. They also work with partners. So we have lots of partners that work with the city in order to maintain recreation programming and to do certain improvements in the parks. Community and Economic Development sort of hosts a lot of those partnerships and those relationships. Community and Economic Development also does the 5-year parks plan, generally speaking. This last year was a little weird. The Ypsilanti Police Department, they are generally the single point of contact for our events. And we also have a huge amount of events. We've got more than 60 per year, generally speaking. All of that is handled by Wendy Esty, who is the department's administrative coordinator. The administrative director might actually be her title. So apologies to Wendy for getting her title wrong. I saw that she was on the Zoom. The city manager, of course, does also play a role. She oversees partnerships. Tom works with communications and ensuring the information about our parks and recreation improvements and our systems get out there. They also coordinate a lot with larger events and work with the Convention and Visitors Bureau on larger events. A little counterintuitively, also kind of backtracking a bit, HR and finance also play a role. So we technically employ a lot of the workers at Rutherford Pool and a couple of the workers over at Park Ridge Community Center. Even though those workers are supervised by the nonprofits and or other partners that actually perform the work. Next slide, please. So functionally, there we go. That's sort of the functional organizational chart where you see the recreation programming, all the partners that help with that. So the pool, the senior center, the Park Ridge Community Center, the Freight House, various other community organizations like Watershed Council and everybody that puts on an event in our parks, basically. The administration is seen by almost everybody in the city, it feels like some days. And park maintenance is generally overseen by the Department of Public Services, as well as our many volunteers. Our partners, we have different types of partners. So we have our facility partners and friends of partners. So that's the obvious ones like the pool, but it's also the Washtenaw County Parks and Recreation Department or Commission who partners with us on a lot of our border to border trail type improvements. The Little League is another one that doesn't usually come to people's minds, but they're active. They're very active this time of year, actually, in 3 of our parks. We have event partners in the Convention and Visitors Bureau, Watershed Council, and various other special events. And we have our grant partners, the Department of Natural Resources, CDBG, MParks, Department of Health and Human Services. Many other people have been kind enough to help us fund our parks plan, which goes right into funding. We have basically 2 types of funding streams. We've got operational funding and then we have capital funding. First, for operational funding, right now we have the health and safety millage, $125,000 of that goes to parks. That millage is through 2024. Just want to point out that we aren't in control of whether or not that millage goes back on the ballot. That is a countywide millage. We also are funded by the general fund, so the general taxes of the city, and by user fees. So if somebody reserves a park, they pay a fee for that. Onto capital funding, that is funded largely through grants predominantly. Many of our partners actually help us fund like the recent border to border trail improvements. And for our larger events, we also levy a capital charge, a per day capital charge for the class 3 and class 4 events in Riverside and Frog Island Park. Next slide. And then overall, this is sort of what it looks like when we throw all of that into the budget. This is sort of the city's overall fiscal capacity right now, which Reagan went into in far more detail than I will. But this budget that you see in front of you is just the operational budget. It doesn't include capital expenditures. So this is what it costs to run the city as of right now. Next slide. So when last we met, going back into the history. So the last time the council had a comprehensive presentation on parks, it was the week before the pandemic, and it was very quickly the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So going back a little bit before that, at the end of 2018, we actually had a more comprehensive meeting where we talked about everything we would love to do in the parks. We had just had the millage passed and dedicated a portion of that funding to parks. The Parks and Recreation Commission came and presented a to-do list in the parks. It was very well done, and you also see that in your packet. We presented an agreement with Washtenaw County Parks regarding the border-to-border trail improvements that were done in subsequent years. And we heard a presentation from OHM on the restroom situation. Out of that came the Parks and Recreation Master Plan that was developed in 2019 and 2020. The major 3 goals that we had were really about capital situation in the parks and the maintenance. So the 3 main goals were ensure parks are attractive and accessible, provide parks that meet Ypsilanti's recreation needs, and continue to work with volunteers and organizations to continue to provide recreation opportunities to city residents. When I wrote those, I plainly never thought that I would have to read them aloud, so. So the emphasis there in all of those goals was really capital improvements, maintenance, and an emphasis on building and maintaining the partnerships that we've been fortunate enough to establish over the previous 10 years. Those goals are reflected as in our other plans, like the non-motorized plan, which focused on providing safe routes to our parks. Our sustainability plan, which focused largely on providing green infrastructure in our parks and maintaining that open space. And our master plan, which was adopted in 2021, it talked about events largely, so improving two areas for festivals, so the Festival Street on Washington Street and one at Depot Town, increasing the number and type of events, creating eco districts and doing green demonstration projects in the parks, and partnering with other organizations to provide educational opportunities in the parks. And that brings us to 2022, where we have 4 major goals. We have the restrooms, facility maintenance, continuing to partner and expand on events and cultural events within the city, and to establish a Parks and Recreation Department. So going into some of the specific topics that are within our Parks and Recreation sphere. First, we'll go with special events. This is administered, managed, thank you, by the Wendy Esty, who's the Administrative Services Manager over in YPD. In the past few years, 2020 itself notwithstanding, we've seen an increase in the number of events. We've seen an increase in the complexity of some of these events. We've also added the Freight House, which has just as many events as the parks do, plus coordination of tours with the Community and Economic Development Department and various other things that come with maintaining a facility. Next slide. This slide has a lot more information about the Freight House. Looks like Chris is here, so if you have any questions, I would direct them to him. Again, this is, it's not managed by any one department. I mean, it is managed, but everybody pitches in. So we have the Ypsilanti Police Department, we have CED, which oversees it, as well as manages the communications and the tours. We have 2 employees, CED has 2 employees that manage the events like on site during the events. We actually have one of our parking enforcement officers, sometimes covers for them if they can't attend. And maintenance is overseen both by a contractor for like the daily cleaning of the toilets and what have you, not daily, I'm sorry, twice weekly cleaning of the toilets. And the Department of Public Services for other maintenance needs like replacing light bulbs and what have you. Next slide. In our other facilities, we have the Senior Center, which has become a 501c3 since last we spoke. We have a formal lease and management agreement with them that runs through 23. Park Ridge Community Center, that's a partnership with WCC, and that agreement auto renews annually. The Friends of the Rutherford Pool, they signed their management agreement back in 2012, and that expires in 2032. So they're all very different agreements. There's not really one size fits all situation. We also have sort of project by project partnerships or event by event partnerships with the Little League and Washtenaw County Parks and Recreation on the Border to Border Trail. So what physically has changed since 2018? Well, we've done a lot of progress on the Border to Border Trail. It was completely rebuilt in Frog Island. Completely rebuilt the sidewalk from along Grove Road and made a safe crossing of the Grove Road Bridge over 94 into Ypsilanti Township. So that partnership is looking like it's going to continue. We are hoping to work with them in the future to bridge the gap between the EMU portion of the Border to Border Trail down to Frog Island. That's sort of the next big priority to work with there, as well as resurfacing in Riverside Park. Overall, next slide. One of the very first things we did with that millage money is replace a lot of the amenities in the parks that were sort of the high visibility, high usage. This was actually led by Community and Economic Development, Chris Jacobs. Replaced or added signs, replaced benches, replaced grills, added wood chips and replaced wood chips around a lot of the play structures, replaced some of the other like doors on some of the older buildings to make them safe. So a lot of improvement and a lot of work went into that. The next big change was really Frog Island Park and all the amazing work that we were able to do with that partner. So the bleachers were also removed and we have lovely stepping stones, built-in seating, as well as lighting in the park now and an accessible connection up to Forest Avenue. We also were awarded a grant from the Natural Resources Trust Fund to continue that work and to make the north end of the park a lot more accessible. Next, in Candy Cane Park, we removed and replaced the existing play equipment, which had been discontinued. We could no longer find replacement parts. We brought that down towards the south end of the park. We cooperated with the Little League in placing that and making sure it was a safe place to place that. But it is a much more accessible and a much more visible play structure. In Park Ridge, Community and Economic Development did a very similar thing. They worked with Washtenaw County Office of Community and Economic Development with CDBG funding to replace and relocate and really expand the play equipment that is in there. We also resurfaced the basketball court. We're continuing to work on that and some art in that area. We have improved the ADA access to the Park Ridge Community Center and we'll continue to do that in the coming years. And we've received some grant funding for other improvements, including to the softball field. So some other things that we've done in the intermediate years, we worked with partners to perform a feasibility study for a paved and accessible pathway along the perimeter of the park and recreation park. In Prospect Park, we worked with volunteers to identify some needs of the Luna Lake Garden and performed a major weeding there. And we've been working with donors and partners in there. Right now, we anticipate that Prospect Park is going to be sort of our next major push because it has some of the oldest yet most used play equipment and overall gets quite a bit of use. So in summary, sorry, that was so long. Parks and Recreation Commission advises council. Every department in the city touches Parks and Recreation currently. We have operational funding that largely comes out of the general fund. Capital costs are, of course, one-time items. Sometimes they do affect our operational cost in the long term, but largely those initial capital costs are funded through grants. We currently, as of this very moment, depending upon what comes out of this meeting, we will continue to pursue the goals of the 2020 Parks Plan, including addressing a lot of the deferred maintenance that the city has had issues with throughout the years, and to continue to execute projects as identified in the capital improvements plan as approved by council. And that concludes this very brief presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Westler, and I do want to apologize to council and those that are in the audience for being late coming in, but it was like I was helping some people out. Jennifer.
Oh, sorry, actually, I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation, and it's really been noticeable the improvements that have happened in the parks in the last couple of years, and it really makes me as a citizen proud. And I just actually want to say kudos and thank you for all the hard work that's been done so far. So I'm excited about the potential going forward, but you guys have really done a lot of great work. So thanks. Sorry, just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Mr. Wilcoxon, did I see your?
Nope.
Okay. Well, I was tardy, but I come with real good information. There are several things that I see on our list here, and we were talking about things that needed to be done and didn't quite know where we'd find the money. I had a call this afternoon that SIMCOG has tons and tons of money for parks and recreation, and it's ours for the asking. I got this from a member of the committee that they met a few days ago to talk about the money that they have. And this person specifically called out Ypsilanti. I tried to reach Kevin Torino at SIMCOG, but I wasn't. I do plan on reaching out to him first thing in the morning. But whoever is in charge of the budget for Parks and Rec needs to get done everything that we need. And I spoke specifically to the person that called me with this information about the restrooms. And that is something she said that we could get money for. If we could get money to repair the restrooms in every park and only open them when they are, when there is an event, a scheduled event, a planned event, I think that would be absolutely wonderful. I know a group of people that would be ecstatic to have the bathroom at Park Ridge Park repaired. So I can talk more to you about this later. Right? But it needs to be done this week. I mean, not the total thing, but we need to make it known that we are planning to ask for money.
I can reach out to Kevin. Yeah.
Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Bonnie. And again, like Councilwoman Simmons said, it's a noticeable upgrades to the parks that we're really appreciative of. I want to ask a question as of it's different. Like the Arts Commission have projects in the park going on with the big things that they're putting up in different parks. What kind of partnership are you guys working with? Do the Parks and Rec Commission work in conjunction with the Art Commission to do some of these projects? Or is it just a simply Arts Commission with permission from council?
So that particular project has largely been coordinated on the staff end.
Okay,
But the Parks and Recreation Commission and I believe the Arts Commission are looking forward to working together on other projects in the future.
okay. I just want to know how that looked like, but thank you so much.
That project, I can speak to that a little bit. That project came through my office and it went to community development, and Christopher handled that for us. And so like Bonnie had said in an earlier slide, that we all kind of do this together and we work with various partners. This was a partner, what was her name?
Nancy Marco.
Yes, Nancy Margolis. She was just a person that saw this in Florida, I believe. Yeah. So we facilitated that partnership and being able to bring that artwork to Riverside Park. And also Park Ridge.
Thank you, no more questions. Thank you, City Manager, for clarity.
And, Mr. Jones Chance.
Yeah, Bonnie, what are some of the issues with the current system for managing parks with, between all the different departments and personnel?
We are hoping to hear that from outside eyes tonight.
Okay, I mean, do you have any issues with, okay.
No.
And then what are some of the pressing deferred maintenance items that you brought up?
Most of the deferred maintenance issues actually still exist in the Peninsular Park area, and that's largely due at this point to us not wanting to fight off anything until the dam is down, because that will change the landscape of the park pretty significantly. We want to make sure everybody's on the same page before we start changing things up. So for example, the stairs and the pavilion there.
Okay, and then if there were a separate Parks and Recreation Department, do you think that there would be any efficiencies gained, or would it be, more trouble than it's worth in your opinion?
It all depends on what the goals of council are. And so that is something we are hoping to hear from you later on tonight with the presentation after the next one.
All right, well, we're hoping for a little help. I know.
Bonnie, you are so.
And this is not a sort of justify your position thing, but what are some of Wendy's other responsibilities? Or is it chiefly the events management, or I guess what I'm getting at is, could that position be transitioned into a Parks and Rec management position?
So I don't want to speak for Wendy at all, and I can't speak for the police department because obviously I'm not there. I do know that she oversees the 3 records clerks, so the people that are in charge of basically the customer service, portion of the police department that retrieve records for people, that help people, clear all the various paperwork items, retrieve code vehicles, that sort of thing. She also oversees the school crossing guard program. There's like 3 other things she does that all surprise me, but she has essentially more than one full-time job with this particular roster of duties.
It sounds like that would work. It's sort of like a catch-all position sort of a thing.
It has an interesting history how that duty came to land there.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I think that's all. Thank you.
I think it kind of landed there after being in the manager's office. And because the police did a lot of the coordination for getting the police there, and telling people how much the fee would be for that. And getting barriers and that kind of thing. And I think when it left out of the management office, since they were working in concert together, it kind of landed over there. That was like the next person that knew the most about the process.
Okay, so I guess that brings up another question then. Is there, it's something, it just seems like everyone does everything. So is there a role that, somewhere in city staff that might be, let's say if we had to choose one that would become, a Parks and Rec department head or manager or something like that? Is there some role in the city that maybe would be a good fit for that? Or is everyone just, doing too much already?
Yeah, I think you'd have to define what that person would do. Because right now, people are doing their assigned tasks according to the department that they're in. So, a piece of it is over here because this is how that department plays a part in it.
Mhm.
So we could not physically, put all those people under one person. So it would depend on how you would define what this person would do.
So who's the point person that coordinates all of the work that all the different departments?
So it depends on what it is. So if it is a special event, that would be Wendy. If it may be a community partnership, if it's going to one of those 4, say it's something for senior center. Senior center does their own programming, but if it was something for one of those 4 outside satellites, Christopher is the point person that checks in on all of those to make sure that they're coordinating. So it would go to him. So it's kind of like there's different people for different things.
All right, I guess I'm not projecting how I would
So
vote on this, but I guess at this juncture, I'm sort of struggling to see what we would be adding with a separate department.
and that is what we want to hear from you, because the goal came from you. So we want to know what is the added value that you are seeking? Is it more of communication, more of branding, so that people know that we have a division, that deals with parks, and this is how it's ran, and this is the chain, communication type thing, or a physical?
Okay, yeah, I was hoping for a single camera sitcom, but. All right, thanks.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Wilcoxon and then Ms. Southville.
This is a general question, and this could go to Reagan, could go to partly to Bonnie, but mostly between Reagan and City Manager Francis. Is there any calculation for how, when you look at each staff's position on a yearly basis, how much time commitment out of all those people is for park? So say Christopher spends 15% of his time doing park work, 10%, and then what would that look like in terms of FTE equivalent, FTE and budget for that? Because I'm sure the salaries are all over the place for these things, and that would be a different calculation to see.
Yeah, we have not done that. I know that we do. There's a stipend that has been added to some of the positions to accommodate. So it's like if we take those away, we take away the money that they've been getting. So those are things too that we would have to consider.
I'm just looking roughly as,
Yeah.
It's just like I don't want people to lose pay because we shift their job, description to eliminate something, but I'm trying to get an idea of, if we did have a department, it's currently being filled by 4 FTEs or something.
Ms. Somerville?
Yeah, I don't know when the appropriate time to add in commentary, but I wanted to just follow up with what Brian, some of his questions. I guess the last 3 years when I've included this in my council goals, I guess my assumption or vision for what reestablishing a Parks and Rec department in the city of Ypsilanti would look like would be things like programming for the community, youth, seniors, but also everybody of all ages who live here, residents and non-residents who utilize our parks. And it wouldn't just be parks, it would be things like, I don't know, crafts in the freight house, because we now have the freight house. So just like things that other communities can do that I don't think would actually cost us a lot of money if we leverage partnerships with other organizations in the area. And I guess also bathrooms were a big part of it. I've been talking about this for years, and other communities have bathrooms. Ypsilanti deserve, like our residents and users of the parks deserve to have active running bathrooms where they can wash their hands. And obviously we saw that need at the beginning of the pandemic when everything was closed and people didn't have anywhere to use the bathroom. But primarily, I mean, youth engagement. I guess I kind of see like having an established parks department that can coordinate with other groups that are already kind of doing some of this stuff, just more opportunity in all of our parks. So I don't know, that's where my vision was kind of at, more of like a structured community engagement within our park system, but not just limited to actual physical parks. I mean, we also have the freight house now where we can do programming, like, I don't know, like dance classes at like a really reduced or free for residents, getting sponsors for those types of things, so we can actually activate the space for community use.
Can I say something? Can I say something? I appreciate your comments. But I just go back to think about, I wasn't here when they got rid of the Parks and Rec department. But we got rid of the Parks and Rec department, I was told, because we could no longer afford the Parks and Rec department. So we encouraged these friend groups to come forward. And over time, we've encouraged them to be self-sustaining. And in that, they've taken on the responsibility of doing their own programming. Although the facilities belong to us. Senior Center, they have Zumba, they have all kinds of things, but they do it themselves, their own programming, they have their way of doing it. Park Ridge, they do a lot of things through WCC. They're programming with youth and all of that. Then now we're considering a partnership with UMS to do some programming at Freight House. Now they want to do youth programs, they want to do art stuff. So we're challenged with, at this point, do we revert what we planned, what we started? And then we say, bring it all to us. I think Rutherford Pool does their own programming as well. And so we like that. They are sustaining themselves, but how can we organize it and brand it to present it to the city is what I'm thinking we should do. This is my own opinion. If it doesn't cost us, why go and, because they're doing their thing. They're getting grants to do what they do, but how, they don't know sometimes if they're gonna be offering a Zumba class 2 months before they do it. Because I look at other communities and they have a Parks and Rec program and they have regular flyers, we're offering this and doing this because it's in-house and they have a person that's going out reaching to develop this program. But we have 4 entities that are programming. Do we want to shut that down? Is a question. Or do we want to bring that in and make it useful and make it, give the community the knowledge that it's there. And so I just kind of want you to think about that a little bit because I see where you're at. So we're doing the maintenance part now, which is good. We're keeping them up. It's the programming part because when you look at parks departments, that's what they do, programming, maintenance. So just something to think about.
If I could add a little asterisk to what city manager was saying, that the only reason we shut down Parks and Recreation was because of the budget. When it was shut down, there were any number of things that were cut out of the budget. Fortunately, we had a city manager at the time that was seeing the real crash or the fall of the economy that was coming. And so he started back in 2001, 2002, just eliminating things from the budget so that by the time that that crash did come, we were in a position where we were not like a lot of other municipalities. And being involved with the league at the time, many municipalities were running around, dizzy because they were losing money, but they had not made the preparations as the city of Ypsilanti. We led in that. And but in our friends, the people, the residents stepped up because they wanted to see recreation continue in the city, and they became very innovative in what they did. And I can't see us just kind of locking them off if we start a Parks and Recreation Department. I think it's some way that we'll have to work with them within, and maybe it will all come under the umbrella, but definitely not just cutting off the work that they did. And Ms. Simmons had her hand up, so thank you.
Yeah, I appreciated that's the things you were saying, Annie, because about 4 years ago, I think we had a vote about whether to put it kind of Parks and Rec, the different components of it back under one person, maybe Joe's area. And I voted for that. It wasn't ultimately passed because I thought maybe under one person directing it, whether it was kind of split and maybe not an official department, at least there'd be, kind of consistency and things like that. I mean, we've been able to make it work, obviously, with the current structure. And so, and like I said, I think everyone's been doing a fabulous job, and we've elevated our parks and whatnot, but I'm kind of interested in what can we do to help support, even whether it's the friends groups and things, and just continue to add to what we can offer, our citizens and things. We've kind of made a commitment that parks are part of, kind of our overall mental health and things, and recognizing the importance of those. So I guess I'm not opposed to keeping it the same if you think and staff thinks like we're able to do this and be pretty efficient with it, but I guess if there's a way where it's like, well, yeah, if we kind of had it, and maybe it's not a department, but maybe it is just how it's consolidated or something, differently or whatever. I guess I'm open to that. So I just kind of want to do what's, in the best interest and keeps these areas thriving, and create efficiencies, I guess.
Mr. Morgan and then Ms. Somerville.
How long has the Parks and Rec Department been dispelled?
It's 2003, I believe it was. Mr. Barr, do you remember? Yeah. He's shaking his head. Yes, 2003.
So in 19 years, the piecemeal a la carte programming that we provided through different Rutherford Pool, all these different places, they've been self-sustaining for 19 years.
Yeah.
The first 10 years, my understanding is we're a little rough.
Okay. So in my meager opinion, to streamline, because it seemed like whether they're, I know we had to help out the senior center with some of their, and we took back the Freight House, so it was some struggling here and there, but it seems like the programming with a little booster shot from the city could still sustain itself. So I think it's more of a marketing and advertising, because when, like Councilwoman Somerville, it should be a book somewhere where swim classes, knitting, kung fu, things that we probably offer in different parts of the city to come together. So when someone looks, that they know we still have these things to offer. I just don't believe that they know the information and the location in certain areas are relegated to certain events or certain things. So it's more of us as a city bringing it back in, but not supervising or someone who's administering, right, not controlling. However, because they do provide services, but I just think that if people in Ward 3 and Ward 2 knew as much as about Rutherford Pool and people in Ward 3 knew about Park Ridge, it'd be some more. So I think they're doing a great job of providing services. And I just think, again, a booster shot, whatever that means for us as a city to present it, I think they need help with presentation, marketing, advertising, and branding collectively. Because in summer, like Park Ridge have a summer program every year, and that's very well marketed. Everyone knows the 12 to 14 classes they offer. And so, but I think that should be citywide in a sense. So I think a lot of things are in order. Again, when we move further into the agenda, hopefully we can put some things together to get it all back under one roof somehow without control. Thank you.
And Ms. Somerville, you were next.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, I'm not suggesting that we do anything with the current friends groups. I think what they're doing is fine. I guess I'm saying what we should consider doing is our own programming for all the pieces that we're missing. So there's lots of people who don't get to participate at Park Ridge or at the senior center, but there might be something that we could do for like all ages where we have like different things that happen at the park or the Freight House. I don't want to suggest in any way that I think we should do anything with the friends groups at Park Ridge, at the senior center, or at Rutherford Pool. I thought when we all made, with the people who were at council, we made the decision to be in charge of the Freight House again. Part of that was to turn it into an opportunity for more engagement for Parks and Rec. That was in the discussions that we had in open meetings. And that's what I was under the impression of back in 2019. So yeah, I'm not interested in doing anything with the three friends groups. I just think that we could offer our residents more if we had programming for everyone. And I'm not necessarily saying we need a full department, but maybe one full-time employee that does this and coordinates with everybody else that's already doing all these other things. And obviously bathrooms are like kind of separate from the idea of us doing our own program with Parks and Rec, but so I kind of see those as two separate things, but bathrooms is going to be a long-term good investment for more engagement at our parks, so people don't have to worry about where they're gonna use the bathroom at.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I think when you circle back, Councilmember Somerville, that's what I was thinking along the lines when I supported us talking about like Parks and Rec as a department or it's some new iteration of it. Is more so not to deviate from what other groups are already, the friends groups are doing, but to fill in the gaps. Because there are, I think Councilmember Morgan said something like super poignant that I was thinking about when we were getting the presentation about, you know, people not being aware of what's happening if a location's in one ward versus the others. And so there's lots of programming that's happening that also is just not spread throughout the community that needs to be discussed, but also there are pieces that none of those places are doing that we could fill the gap, not necessarily, bless you, you know, doing the program ourselves, but connecting, collaborating with entities that may do that and bringing them to the city so that we can be the folks or that one staff person who is coordinating that, but not necessarily like implementing programming. So I think we'll probably need to like tease this out a little bit more, of course, and this conversation is helping me to kind of frame what that could possibly look like. But I do think there's a lot of great things that are already happening in the community, but there's also some opportunities for us to kind of get in there as well with some of the ideas that maybe a staff person or a department that could take this under their umbrella could really give us a little bit more robust reach when it comes to everyone, you know, in Ipsy.
Ms. Somerville.
Oh yeah, just to bounce off of that, so I keep writing volunteers down on the sheet. I always like to plug this in every once in a while. I think this is a great opportunity for us to collaborate with Eastern Michigan University. So I would love to have us like, I mean, I would like to maybe be involved and sit down with like the Engage office. And I mean, I think they're a good umbrella for all of the entities at EMU, but I see like lots of opportunity to engage with departments and students and grad students there that would like to offer services to the community that we could make programs. So I just like, that's where having a full-time employee that can kind of oversee all of this comes in. Sorry, I think that this would be a great opportunity to collaborate with me.
Yeah, so academic service learning comes to mind.
Yeah.
Academic service learning, Engage, you know, the offices,
All the like Greek life organizations,
Greek life.
athletics.
I would like to, I did perhaps undersell, in the last year, we've worked with a lot of the individual case by case sort of portions of EMU on volunteering within our parks. So that's a relationship we've actively been building. Of course, we have an established relationship with the CED department and EMU Engage. So
Mr. Jones-Chan.
Yeah, I guess this is a question that's sort of been lingering, I guess, for a minute. So in our own way, do we already kind of have a Parks and Rec department that's just spread out and not really, uniform? So it sounds to me like what we're getting close to is maybe what we need to do is tighten up some of the communications and the coordination between the city and the Friends Group and the public. And beefing up our maintenance. I do agree that the bathroom thing is sort of like a non-negotiable for me anyway. And just filling some of the programming gaps. And then my question is for staff is that something that's doable? Tightening communications and coordination with the Friends Groups, filling the programming gaps. I mean, is that something that we have the capacity to do with what we have currently?
Mayor Pro
Staff-wise,
Tem,
or-
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, I'm sorry.
Mr.
No,
Jones,
no.
No, that was a question.
Oh, you were through.
Mr.
Okay.
Jones-Chance, I would say that we have most of that. We just don't have anyone that actively does programming. We have partnerships when people come to us, but we don't have anyone, I don't believe, that actively seeks
That could be done.
programming. Yeah,
Um,
am I right, Bonnie? Anybody know of any? Christopher's not here.
Well, I don't want to overstep or overcommit an employee, but I wonder if that's something that the new communications director would take on, or is that sort of part of the role, or?
Yeah, he works out of my department, and I think that's probably something he could take on. It's about us seeing what all the other people are offering and what it is that our community needs. Because neither of those entities do just one thing. So you know what I mean? Senior Center sometimes does Zumba, they have parties and kids stuff, whatever, and so does Park Ridge. So, but the pool is the one that always just does a pool. I don't think it'll be a problem getting a schedule from them. But the other ones, but it's something to look forward to doing in order to fill the gaps. I think we're mirroring that with the Freight House, with our talks with UMS. They already know what they're gonna do. They're putting it in writing for the couple of months that they have the contract. So that's great. But if we could get everybody else to do that, that would be great. But we could fill the holes. I'm not sure how we would find out. Is that a mosquito?
What is it? Flying around, everybody's. What is it?
it's the first indoor mosquito of the year.
Yeah, fine.
It's a mosquito?
Yeah,
It is.
there's another bug going around, but that one was definitely a mosquito.
Yeah.
Did you?
So the cricket was a phone alarm, and that means it's time for my kids to go have fun.
So, yeah, Mr. Jones-Chance, I guess we would just have to be educated on what the gaps are. Like, I get what you're saying, fill the gaps, but what are the gaps? I mean, do we feel that we need more exercise, we need more kids stuff, we need more,
Are we coming to a point where we're looking at maybe possibly a part-time employee? To do all of this rather than a full department?
Christopher says he doesn't have a problem with filling the gaps.
Okay,
What?
Mayor Pro Tem.
So I think along those lines, what I was thinking, so work with me here, I work in a clinic, but it makes me think about like centralized intake, right? So the idea of having a full-time staff so that you have that point person that all those ideas come to, it's streamlined through that person and who keeps up the calendars, requests that information from these other entities that are doing things, and then has the ability to look at that and say, okay, what's missing here? And what's the community telling us that we want to see, and seeks those programs or services or whatever it is to fill those gaps. Because I don't even think that we could sit here and say, I can tell you all every single thing that's a gap, but I can think of some things, that young folks have said maybe, or that folks that they want to see. But if we have someone who that is their job and they are like the centralized person that we know if you have ideas or if there are things that are missing, those requests come to this person. And they also coordinate with these other entities. That could be somebody, again, who's already here, or, that would be up to the city manager, and then, for us to figure out how that will look. But the idea of like a centralized place where these bases are covered is what seems like is just the best fit. So it doesn't have to be a department, it could totally be a person. So we're making sure that we're not missing opportunity as well to engage.
Okay, so these would be city sponsored. We would decide if there was fees charged, fees not, because right now we have this special events, when people want to do something. They know how much to pay, whatever, because that's their space. So in this case, it would just be our programming, so we're in charge. If we had to get a facilitator or someone to come in, that's ours.
Yeah, and I think
So that's our tab.
right, but the thing that I'm thinking of is, we can get around some costs if we collaborate with these other entities, like continue working with EMU. Ozone House may want to come in and do a poetry something in collaboration. So it doesn't necessarily have to be just the city is the brainchild of these ideas, but we are the hosts, we are putting these on, we are filling our calendar with these different things that maybe other people are doing.
Okay.
But we are making sure that the city is providing for everyone. So it's maybe provided by an expert coming from elsewhere.
So I get what you're saying, so now we do that. Because if Ozone House or anybody wants to do anything, they just contact us.
Right, and I'm saying we should be reaching out instead of them reaching in, so that we make sure that we are offering things out to the community as well, not just when.
Just kind of proactively.
Yeah, proactively, rather than when like an organization's like, oh, we have an idea, maybe we have the idea.
I get it, and so we have an idea, I'm just hypothetically, we have an idea, we don't have enough something. The city's gonna sponsor it, but nobody shows up because we don't have it. I'm just asking,
Wait, I guess.
because most of the time when people come with something, they have a connection, they have the people, they've done this is, they're bringing their people to this event.
Oh, I
So
think
now
that's-
we're becoming promoters, we're becoming, you get what I'm saying?
No, I
We're
agree.
sponsoring this, so now we're gonna promote this. I'm just thinking out loud.
So I think, and I'll let someone else speak after I say this part, but I think that it will be a both and. I think that if we partner with an org or some type of community group, they will have their audience that they can invite and they will come too. And while we're marketing it to the city abroad, so I don't think we'll ever have an opportunity where it would be like nobody comes, because if we're doing this right, we're collaborating, then they have an audience already as well, right? And so we kind of have a built-in cushion or a built-in jumping point. And I think if we started to do this and it became a part of what the city does, we will see people come because it will be a part of the fabric of IPSI. IPSI offers programs and people are gonna talk about it and they're gonna tell, and Anthony's gonna tell Nicole and Nicole's gonna tell Francis. And eventually it may start off with small numbers, but it will eventually, I think it will grow because we're giving a service that has not existed here for a very long time and not in the name of the city of IPSI itself, right? So, I mean, I don't know, this is like a passion project here, so.
Mr. Morgan.
I have two separate things, but one that's gonna be a very simple, and I'm sad that I don't know this. All of the programming that goes on at Ypsilanti in these different friend groups, are they all posted in one place on our website?
And that's, I think, is something that's needed.
Okay,
That's
now,
something that's-
I'm just saying, like, if there was May coming up and all 4 of those, 5 of those friend groups put their events on a calendar in May, it would look like we had a rec department.
Yeah, that's the thing I said.
Right.
I'm just saying, so it's 16 events in May, you would have a choice to go to knitting on Wednesday or,
Right, and so that's already existed, and so that's without us doing program.
right,
That's just making people aware.
so that's
That's
streamlined, okay.
that's the advertising piece. And I think our advertising would definitely have to be virtual, online, because we wouldn't be able to publish a lot of things in advance in a document.
So we could have a page
Yeah,
theoretically attributing, like this for our friend groups. Okay, secondly, I want to know, this is just for clarity. If the parking recs hypothetically did these 16 things, right? This is what the objective of the parking recs does, but then it's 4 different groups or individuals that do these things, like grants. So some of them are overlapping, right? So it's like, at what point, I'm trying to find out things that are overlapping. Are there some things on that list that only specialists or experts can do that are not overlapping, that are specific to their job? Or can everything just be outsourced? Like, I don't want to write a grant, so I ask you, Bonnie, why don't you write a grant for this particular project? So how many things can we keep how many things do we need to overlap versus to maintain the objective of the what Parks and Recs do? Can we simplify it? Or does it have to be expanded and have so many people do that? Or is it like I write grants when it's pertaining to mulch, or you write it when it's pertaining to equipment? So is it just that, you know what I'm saying, specific?
Yeah, so I think that really does vary depending upon department. Like grants, I think both DPS and CED are equally positioned to identify a grant and go for the grant. Something like events booking, that's pretty specialized. Somebody else could do it, but they would need to be trained and coordinated, because you don't want two people working on booking the same date for different things, and then it's, you know, a conflagration. So I think that it's something that varies from topic area to topic area.
Thank you. Sorry for keeping you up there so long. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Well, I think we've done like half of Ron's second presentation.
Okay.
So,
We are already in there, so you can breeze through it.
Okay, Annie,
Just to follow up on like just an example of how some of this proactive programming for like things that we don't already do. When I first got on council, I was like, hey, Christopher, I want to have movies in the park. And we did movies in the park, and like 80 people showed up in October when it was really cold. So I guess like I want to see more movies in the park or movies at the Freight House, like just like classics to get the community engaged and like in the same space.
and that adds another layer of complexity, actually. 'Cause I
Sure,
think
yeah,
movies in the
everything
park
that's
are
not
a
as
DDA
complicated.
game.
Yeah, that was a
I can talk about it. We currently. So after that, we did 6 movies last year, and we rented the screen and had like a contractor come out and actually put up everything, take it down. We talked about like buying the equipment, and one of the problems at that time was, well, there's nobody who could store the equipment, put it up, and take it down. And I know that was one of the sticking points as to why we continue to contract that service. And it's actually this month at the DDA, we're going to be looking at another set of movies. So we continue to do the movies. We're just not able to do them in-house because of some of the operational, you know, difficulties.
And another point to that, I don't know exactly how much room the setup actually physically takes, but we're pretty maxed out at our DPS facility and even storing things here at City Hall. So that even with the department, there might still be some barriers to certain projects.
I mean, generally, the division of labor is maintenance comes out of DPS, programming comes out of CED as capacity allows.
Mr. Jones Chance.
I feel like we're really close. So it sounds to me like maybe if we were to take a step in the right direction, I think it sounds like what most people are asking for on this side of the dais is if the city could find a person or persons who would curate, aggregate, and do some centralized promotion of programming. And also some maintenance items that I think we all agree are pretty important.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that would that's sort of like a nice little midpoint between where we are now and having a full-blown Parks and Rec department or an extra staff member. And it sounds like we might have someone in the communications director who can already maybe do that. I mean, I don't know how everyone else feels on this side, but I feel like that's a nice compromise. I feel like everyone here would be slightly dissatisfied, and that's good.
And I understand what you're saying. I tend to feel that maybe possibly we want to hire a part-time Parks and Recreation coordinator rather than adding it to someone that's already here. Because what I always hear from staff and is that all the staff are really working to capacity and beyond. So rather than hiring a full-time person, possibly a part-time person, that would be the Parks and Recs coordinator, and doing exactly what you said, but that would be that person's sole thing would be to coordinate with work with the commission, work with the friends groups, and do the getting everything ready for the publication so that it would be go out. But rather than hire a whole full department, but a part-time person. Yes.
Yeah, I guess I should be clear. What I'm suggesting is that we see what we can do with what we do have already. And maybe we report back in some months or something like that and see if it's working out or not. But I mean, maybe it sounds like there's just this programming part needs to be systematized. So maybe the friends groups submit things to us that they have, and then we can put it on a web page on the city site and just have a point person that does that. We don't have to come up with anything, but it'd be nice for the public to have one place to go where they can see it all. Like Mr. Morgan was saying. So yeah, then we centralize the promotion, we curate the events, and we aggregate them all together, and it looks like we got a whole thing. And then if it becomes too much, then I think maybe at that point we can talk about adding staff if it feels inadequate at that time. That's what I'm suggesting.
And I'm totally agreeing with everything that you're saying, except that the part about hiring a part-time person from the beginning. But I agree totally with what you're saying. Thank you. Okay, seeing no hands. Bonnie, and I see Bonnie easing away from the microphone. Thank you so very much. Mr. Akers.
Good evening, council. So the first part of the presentation I had was mainly with regards to parks bathrooms and a discussion that's focused around that. Next slide, please.
Give me 1 second. I gotta make sure everybody else can see it.
Don't get a presentation from Evan.
Are we on the, oh,
So one of the things with park bathrooms that I want to discuss is I want to first talk about our current situation, what we do right now, what the existing conditions of the bathrooms in the parks are. We're going to talk about the OHM proposal from 2018 and that. The second portion regarding goals, we want to make sure introduce what we're asking council to do this evening as far as scope and prioritization and identify goals. We're next going to talk about operations, some considerations with regards to the operations of the parks bathrooms, some financial considerations, which I believe you've seen the slide already on Bonnie's presentation. And then look at some potential alternatives and then move forward with next steps recommendations. Next slide, please. So according to our Parks and Rec plan, we have 15 city parks. In those parks are included the Spanish Memorial lot that's over by Domino's. There's the Hot Brothers Park over on Grove. So some of the top lots, some of the smaller parks as well. There are 5 closed bathroom buildings in the parks in Prospect, Candy Cane, Park Ridge, Riverside, and Peninsula Park. We do provide seasonal porta-johns in 8 of our city parks. We provide them from May 1st through September 30th. And then we also maintain a porta-john at Riverside Park until November 30th. These porta-johns are serviced weekly. Their 2022 cost, I just spoke with the contractor last week, is projected at $185 per month for 8 porta-johns. That is an estimated cost of $7,400 per year. That cost estimate up there does not include some of the other cost considerations that come into play, like if they're damaged, we have to pay for replacement. Would we have them serviced additionally if somebody trashes the bathroom? Those are all added costs. Next slide.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
This is gonna be a very simple question again. What makes a park, right? Like Peninsula Park has no swings or anything in there. Is it the land mass? Is it what's in it, or what's the potential for it to become? What is a park?
My understanding is based on ordinance, and Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the city charter is a council resolution designated as a park.
Okay. Thank you.
So OHM conducted a parks restroom evaluation study in October of 2018. Purpose of this was to evaluate the condition of bathroom buildings, provide recommendations to make them operational again, and to provide an opinion of probable cost of construction. The study looked at repairing the restrooms at Prospect, Candy Cane, Park Ridge, Riverside, and Peninsular. It also included the construction of a new restroom building at Recreation Park. The proposal had been attached to your packet for council's consideration. And what we're going to do is we'll briefly go through the various bathroom buildings that are outlined in the proposal. I want to highlight to council to please keep in mind that these inspections were done in 2018. Over the 4 years, the scope of work may have changed due to further deterioration. So based on what's decided tonight, we will have to have them reevaluated and looked at. Repair and maintenance is listed for all the pavilions and include many items such as painting, sealing of cracks in the building and in concrete, replacement of all the restroom fixtures, there's plumbing repairs, glass block window replacement, electrical repairs, many things that are like that. They're listed for all the bathrooms. Some of the costs in this proposal do include televising the sanitary lead, which if it's in bad condition, will need to have repair and replacement. And that was not included in the cost of all the bathrooms. So if they're televised and they're in worse shape, the costs are gonna go up. And those replacements tend to be a fairly large cost item. The other significant cost items that were identified with regards to the water service. So let's take a look at the bathrooms. The first is Prospect Park. We talked about building repairs and maintenance. The estimated cost in 2018 was $86,400. One of the additional recommendations that I would have is that we make sure we look at the underground sanitary lead to make sure it's in good shape. Next slide, please. Next, we have Candy Cane Park. As you can see, there's some additional cracks in the wall that will need to be sealed and cracks in the concrete that will need to be grinded down. This bathroom is recommended to have the sanitary line replaced. As many of you know, the sanitary leads that are in that neighborhood are all Orangeburg, which has a history of failing, and it has been recommended, excuse me, as we believe this is Orangeburg as well, that this line will need to be replaced. Next slide, please.
The next one.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the scope of repairs for Park Ridge Park include what we've discussed before. The sanitary line is recommended to be televised to determine its condition. That is included in the price estimate. I will note that there is a project this year where we're planning on replacing the concrete around the pavilion. This is going to be funded through CDBG and it should reduce the cost estimate. Next slide, please. Riverside Park, the scope of repair. Excuse me, the estimate for repairs includes the replacement of the water service to the building, which based on OHM staff interviews, we believe is broken. And then the sewer revise is also going to need to be televised as part of this. Next slide, please. For Peninsula Park, the scope of work includes repairs of the exterior and interior of the buildings. We would recommend televising the sanitary lead as with the others. There has been a problem in Peninsula Park in recent years with regards to a spring that has begun to flow out of the adjacent hill. This spring last year did flood the pavilion, and the solution should be figured out prior to making repairs to this building. In addition to this, with the removal of the Peninsula Dam and potential park planning efforts, it may make sense to hold off on repairs of this bathroom until after those planning efforts have been completed and we have a strategy for how we're going to move forward with Peninsula Park. Next slide, please. Recreation Park does not have a bathroom building, but according to the study, it appears there used to be one which was removed. The recommendation here is to have a prefab bathroom building installed, which will need to have a sanitary line and water service led to it. There may be an existing sewer lead and water service from the prior building, but more exploration will need to be done to determine if that's there and if they're in usable condition. I will note that with this particular proposal, the cost estimates do not include installing those sanitary and water lines. So with this slide, I want to apologize. There is an error in the spreadsheet. So the last two rows, we added architecture and engineering costs to the item. And as it turns out, as we were going through the cost estimates a little closer, those were already added in. So the numbers that I want council to take a look at is the row which says total construction. So the 2018 OH estimate was outlined in the column to the left. The total construction was estimated at $645,900. We provided a range of cost estimates. And the reason why we did that is just based on the fluctuation in construction costs and fluctuation in materials prices that we've been seeing over the last couple of years. So we provided an updated number based on inflation. We used the BLS calculator at the federal government website. But we've also added projected increases of between 30 and 40%, because that's what we're seeing construction jobs come in at now. They're significantly higher than originally projected. So the 904,000, excuse me, dollar number is probably a closer number that we would be looking at for replacing these costs or replacing these bathrooms if we were going to do everything in entirety. One of the, based on the scope and the discussion, we can spread that out or do different things, but just that number is probably going to be pretty close to what we're looking at. Next slide, please. So one of the main purposes of this discussion is for staff to better understand council's goals for opening the restroom. This will help us identify a scope of work as we move forward. We've listed some example goals for council's consideration based on some things that we had heard or been aware of, been discussed previously. And we're also looking to find out what goals are more important if there are multiple goals, so prioritization. Next slide, please. The other main purpose of this discussion is to identify the scope of the project. We're looking specifically for answers to questions such as, are we going to attempt to fix all of the bathrooms, or should we only focus on certain parks? If we're unable to complete all the parks bathrooms at once, what should our prioritization be? And should we repair the existing buildings, or should we focus on doing something different or looking at an alternative? Next slide. The other consideration when looking at repairing these restrooms is how we're going to fund operations and what the level of service provided is. Questions such as how often should we clean the bathrooms, and should we provide that service internally, or should we be looking at contracting the service out? Other questions, what are the hours of operation? When and how are we going to open and close the bathrooms? May require some staffing adjustments or changes. Another consideration to look at with regards to operations is public safety. If bathrooms are going to remain open, we may have to look at some design considerations to make sure that the bathrooms are safe. There's always the potential for vandalism. Without going too far down this subject item, it is my understanding that we have had issues in the past. So design considerations for this are something we're going to want to take a look at. And then the last one is seasonal maintenance. These bathrooms aren't designed to be open year round, so they'll need to be winterized, and there's some additional costs that tie in with that. Next slide, please. So the next item I wanted to talk about, and I'll move through it briefly because it's already been touched on, but financial considerations. So we look at capital costs, which is our fixed one-time expenses for constructing the buildings. And then you look at recurring costs, which are with regards to our operations and our operating costs for maintaining the buildings. The capital costs we've seen, we can move to the next slide. So I do not have an analysis as to what projected recurring costs are for the bathrooms, because we still have to define the scope of work and what level of service we're going to provide. We did actually reach out in trying to get an idea of what this would be. We did reach out to our counterparts at Washtenaw County, and they had indicated that they gave us an example situation. So a single bathroom building at County Farm Park had a recurring maintenance cost of about $14,000 per year. While it is likely we will come in, it'll be a little bit cheaper than that for us. The bathroom buildings aren't quite as big. To give kind of an estimated range of what the operating cost could be for 6 bathroom buildings, using this cost as a projection, the city could be looking at between $70,000 and $80,000 per year in added recurring costs to service the bathroom. This figure does not include repairs related to vandalism or any other repairs related to age. I should also note that this projected cost is keeping these bathrooms open, for 7 days a week. As we had indicated previously, questions to this are how often, they're cleaned, routine maintenance, seasonal maintenance. And if we would clean the bathrooms internally or with a contractor is going to have an impact on those costs. And we will need to do a further study to actually analyze what they actually are. Next slide, please. Thank you. We saw this slide with Project Manager Wessler's presentation, so I won't go too far into it, but this is recurring operating costs and what the city's position is. We had discussed it already, so next slide, please. One of the other items we wanted to highlight are potentially a few alternatives council could consider to provide restroom access in the park without repairing the bathrooms. So one of the options is continuing to use portable bathrooms with potentially maybe more frequent servicing of the porta-johns or adding portable hand washing stations. Or we could also look into other portable bathroom options. They do have ADA accessible trailers, which are available. I'm not sure what the costs are, but it could be an alternative that we could take a look at. Next slide. We can also look at partnering with the existing businesses or facilities which are near the parks, or expand use of public restroom facilities which are near the parks. We could install wayfinding signage to signal where restrooms were available and their hours. An example of this would be the senior center is located within Recreation Park. We may be able to talk with them to expand their access as opposed to building a separate building. Next slide, please. And then the last item for alternatives we wanted to look at were some potential alternative design options. So we could, as part of this process, the council chose to move in that direction. We could look at other design options, such as the Portland move some of the public toilets, or they make self-cleaning toilet options that we could take a look at. Next slide. So what are our next steps? Staff is asking that council identify and prioritize goals for the opening of the restrooms. We're also asking that council give direction regarding the project scope, prioritization, excuse me. This includes the questions: what bathrooms are we going to repair? Are we going to spread the project out over multiple years? What bathrooms will be prioritized first if we take this approach? After identifying scope, staff can study the anticipated operational costs for the maintenance of the bathrooms and provide recommendations to council. There will need to be some reduction in operational expenses, as we discussed in the general fund, for future budget years to accommodate current maintenance costs, which we can discuss during budgets. And we should look towards alternative funding sources to help offset our capital costs, such as Michigan Department of Natural Resources Trust Fund grant, or maybe some other grant options that have been highlighted. Next slide. This concludes my summary. I've listed some of the questions on the slide for convenience. Peninsula Park and Recreation Park were highlighted on the slide due to their unique circumstances with the dam removal and after those removed. I'm happy to answer any questions, and we'll be taking comments as well.
Oh, Ms. Simmons.
So thanks, that's a great presentation, per usual, that you guys all do. So I had a couple thoughts when you were saying, going through the presentation. I do like the thought behind maybe more like a pilot program or a multi-year approach. I think in light of, some of the information from Mr. Masaika and just our budget and trying to be mindful of that. I think when I think about the bathrooms, I mean, in an ideal world, yes, absolutely. Having bathrooms in our parks is fantastic because sometimes I drink too much water, and so, it's unfortunate, right, if there's not a place convenient to do that, take care of that. But, I do have concerns too, because, right, I know we've had issues in the past with vandalism. I've seen that in other parks and areas. So I appreciate that you're mindful of those things, very, again, thorough presentation. I guess for me, like to have the fullest confidence saying like, yes, let's spend all this money, I would feel better maybe doing some type of pilot. And I mean, there's all kinds of ways we could think about that, of how we would do that. I mean, my one simple way is like, maybe it's one park in each ward or something like that, the most used park in each ward, or I'm not sure, whatever. I also do like putting consideration into continuing to improve like the park pavilions and structures because they do get a lot of use. And obviously the bathrooms are great to go along with that. I think if we don't repair all the restroom facilities, that perhaps we continue with the porta potties, at least in most of our parks. And trying to think, I guess, like I said, I just have like safety concerns too. We've had issues in our bathrooms in the past, that can be a common thing. And so, right, being mindful, I mean, in Candy King, we had the issue with someone putting a camera in porta potties. So I just want to be really, really mindful of using, what ways we can prevent some of those things too. So I think that's it. Yeah, so I'm kind of down for a pilot, maybe multi-year approach if we're going to go down this route, because I understand it's not just as simple as getting the water running again too. There's the whole winterization and all that stuff. So it's a big, it's a heavy lift. Thanks.
Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ayers. Mr. Akers. It would appear, well, first I want to thank the citizens of Ipsy who went so long without having bathrooms. Wonder how we did it. Playing in these parks, sweating, running without water for a long time. So I want to give them kudos. Secondly, the things that we put into the bathrooms, make them hard to destroy, like metal, aluminum, like not too much things that can be defaced in my mind. But and if I would have an opinion or votes, and I do have a vote, I was thinking the highest priority is the most highly trafficked bathroom should be the highest priority, like Prospect and Park Ridge. In my mind, those are the ones that are used the most. I mean, not the bathrooms, but the space is used the most, and that could be benefited from it. And like Councilwoman Simmons said, not just like are the bridges. We think about like in Frog Island, that's not a part of the funding that's used for the bathroom. We think about the structures, we think about the pavilions versus the bridge. That a completely different funding source when we're talking about upkeep of the parks itself.
So our parks funding comes from a couple different places. There's general fund revenues, which covers parks operations that can be used for capital fees. We've utilized $125,000 from public health and their public safety and mental health millage for capital investments over the last few years, which is how we've paid for a lot of these improvements to the park. And that comes out of our capital improvement fund. So those are the funding mechanisms. Some of the bridges, they're covered from either our transportation funding or Act 1 funds, or we've gotten federal or state grants that cover it.
My last two comments. Again, like Councilwoman Simmons said, I'm thinking like a pilot, like you said, $14,000 compared to Washington County's annual upkeep of a bathroom. I know that's just a number, but perhaps we could, like I'm thinking like a March to October. It doesn't have to be the full year, but a way to determine if it's feasible to keep them open and winterize them and things of that nature. And then I was thinking, I find it hard to believe that a study of operational costs for our bathrooms hasn't been taken somewhere. And like you just did, added 30% and 40% due to the expansion of the. Basically, I think that somewhere laying around, we have to know how much we spend annually for cleaning our bathrooms. So we don't have to do a new study, perhaps we can find an old one and just add to it to save time, but I don't know that much.
I guess what I referred to a study in the presentation, I didn't need to go out and
Okay.
have somebody do a formal study. It's more,
In-house.
identifying the scope of work and what level of service is needed on the bathroom is really gonna influence what our operational costs are. So if, as was stated earlier in the meeting, if we're keeping the bathrooms locked until a private group wants to use them, our maintenance costs are gonna be considerably less than if we leave them open from, 8 AM to dusk every day.
Understand? Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, Ms. Somerville.
Yeah, I just have like two comments. My first comment for just like how this would all work in terms of staffing and maintaining, upkeep and things like that when they're open. I would also like to plug in this like idea of volunteerism. I think there are a lot of people who have been begging for park bathrooms, not just in my ward, but across the city that would step up to the plate, community members, that would be willing, and I think it would also be, if we have a Parks and Rec director, that could be also something that they help coordinate. Park volunteers that actually would be responsible, and it just like ties into this whole like community engagement aspect that I think Parks and Recreation brings. Second comment, obviously the presentation that we got from Mr. Basavika earlier basically show that we don't have any money to do any of this. So now I want to take the opportunity to point out that we have $2 million sitting in a fund for a train stop that, for an Amtrak train stop that I think a few years ago, at the time, a majority of us were not interested in. So I think that this is a perfect opportunity for us to revisit the best use of that money that's been sitting there. Maybe we take 500,000 of it to start putting towards some of these parks. Maybe we take $1 million and actually get all of the parks up to where they need to be functional for the community. But I mean, we're not going to get there with basically the projections that Reagan showed us earlier. We have $0 to spend towards any of this. And that's with all the extra, that's with the extra cannabis revenue that we just got. We can't spend any of it. That's with the ARP. So I guess the only way to do this is if we're actually willing to make a significant change in what we've previously allocated, that's just sitting and not being used. So.
Mr. Jones Chan.
Yeah, I agree with the point about the those dollars. It just seemed like we have some more immediate needs, things that, if we spend the money, they will actually happen. And I guess so. For me, if we can't find any other grant funding, and it sounds like there might be some funding available to do this from outside. And yeah, I think that should be on the table, and I think this might be an appropriate year to revisit that. So it looks like we would be somewhere under 800,000 if we didn't do Peninsula Park, because we're waiting to see what the dam removal effects would be. And Mr. Simmons mentioned the one bathroom per ward thing, and I think if I were to think about this, it might be do repairs first, and then do the building of the the new facility, and then park. And I think that pretty much gets to one per ward. I think that's what we're left with. And I wonder in terms of some of the alternatives, what it sounds like a lot of the costs were plumbing related, and I was at Gallup Park last year, and they have some composting toilets. The facility is about the size of ours, and obviously that eliminates plumbing altogether. I don't know what the cost of the excavation would be, because obviously you can't just it doesn't just compost sitting on the concrete, so you got to dig something out. But that seems to not require much maintenance. Definitely doesn't require any winterization, and frankly, it didn't smell bad. So I think that might be an option if we could also look into that. And then there may be some funding for that because it's composting or, whatever. And you also mentioned the maintenance costs, and I wonder, we're talking about leaving them open. I feel like if we're gonna provide the service, I think, for me anyway, I can't speak for the rest of the council, but for me, the issue with having the bathrooms is that we have the parks, we have the shuttered facilities. And people should have some kind of dignity when they're using our public spaces. And it just doesn't seem acceptable to not, for people have to run home to use the restrooms or whatever they have to do, or cut their visit to the park short, or go around finding something when we have a facility that is there that just can't be used because it's in disrepair. To me, that doesn't seem acceptable. And so I wonder what are the fixed costs of, let's say opening a bathroom versus the marginal costs that we would accrue, for every additional hour that it's open. So if we just do it through special events, you'd mentioned that it would cost far less than if it were open from dawn to dusk. So I'm curious, what are those additional costs that we would incur for every hour that it's open? And is that realistic, or is the cost more fixed and maybe having it open for the duration of the parks, the time that the park is open, maybe wouldn't actually cost so much additional? And maybe that would come out in the study, but I don't know. It sounds like the study is not going to be that detailed.
I think it's going to depend on how frequently the bathrooms are used. So our costs and added costs and items that we have to figure out with regards to maintenance, specifically cleaning, is, I have staff working regular hours at 8 a.m. I can send somebody to open the bathroom buildings. We don't have anybody working after 4. So there's overtime costs, there's other considerations that we're going to need to figure out. We also don't have staff working on the weekends. So, this kind of comes back to maybe a more broader discussion about seasonal labor and how we approach that. We do have other parks related maintenance concerns that occur on the weekends. Wow. We do have other parks related maintenance concerns on the weekends, specifically during the holiday weekends and pavilion rentals. And some of the freight house services too that can be supported by that. So I mean, there may be other alternatives to put things together and come up with some solutions. But it's really going to depend on how often, how frequently it's used.
Okay, and then so looking at the cost of building, okay, so we were talking about Andy Kane Park, so that's another 163. All right, so we're like 640,000 if we were to just do the repairs and leave out Candy Cane building, the Candy Cane construction and Peninsula Park. I mean, that doesn't seem like a ton. And if we can find some outside funding, I mean, this sounds doable if we revisit the station money. So. Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think this is more important.
You realize you just got out full parks and.
Oh. Well, one.
Candy Cane and Penn Parks are the parks and.
Oh, yeah.
Rock Park is a Rock
I
Park.
mean, sorry.
What's that?
The other,
That's-
like,
that's
on the other
weird,
side of the street is Ward 2 at Rock Park, but I always consider
Yeah.
that one Ward 2.
Oh, yeah,
It's
that's
not,
good.
it's
So no,
technically
we have the
not,
best parts.
but Ward 2 users use that park, I think.
I would-
But at any rate, so if we leave out if we leave out the ground up construction, and obviously Peninsula Park just has some logistical issues that we won't know until the dam's on. I would say that's an improvement. Then, I mean, this seems pretty doable with some outside funding and money we have set aside for just being real. I mean, I'm not really sure what, yeah, I mean, I don't think this sounds undoable at all, so I'm with it. It's a priority from what I've heard from my constituents, and I agree.
Mr. Wilcox,
I'm gonna play the pessimism card here. What is it that makes people think that the outcome of putting new bathrooms in will be any different than the outcome when they were open before and they were vandalized and torn apart? And well, we're gonna have to revisit this thing on a continual basis. Has our culture changed from what we've seen in downtown and in parks? And the reason we took out the toilet and rec park is because people were shooting up there. Do we see a sea change in people's behaviors to think that those are going to be safe for the people that we're thinking about, and that there aren't going to be hazards created in those places? That is why they were closed. They were safety issues. There were repairs that couldn't be done on a regular basis because people were trashing them. I mean, we see this with the play equipment, things like that. It's like, this isn't just that money. You know, the operational costs are going to be phenomenal when this happens. And we can go and have great compost and toilets, but that's a really efficient system and cost effective. But what is it that makes us think that the people that live in the city are going to respect this and contribute to the longevity of these projects?
Does you have a specific answer for him right now?
I think so.
Okay.
I guess my comment would be maybe they won't. But for the people who do, you know, they should be able to enjoy the restrooms to the best of our ability to provide them. And so, no, maybe everyone won't. You know, maybe people will shoot up in the bathrooms. In fact, I'm sure they will. But maybe this time around, we can include some sharp spins and things and make it safe, at least for our workers to be able to clean things up and make it safe for the people who are going to be in there. Maybe we can respond differently, but even if we don't, the vast majority of our citizens who aren't doing these things still deserve to have some dignity when they visit public spaces, in my opinion.
But how do you maintain that so they can have that dignity if a small subset of people make it unfeasible for those to be open?
Well, it takes work. I mean,
Well, how do
just
you
have to
address
do
that?
it.
How do you address that? If I'm gonna vote for this, I need to know that there's a program in place to keep these things from happening. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure that we're there yet, but
So
I hear you knocking.
if I could add just briefly, you know, a couple things that, and this is based on my discussions with my staff regarding how the bathroom operations were, you know, in the early 2000s and late 90s, but my understanding is we didn't lock the bathrooms before overnight, so they were allowed to stay open all night long. So, you know, that would be something I think with proper management, we would be able to hopefully curb some of the overnight issues. The other item that I wanted to bring up, and you know, whether it's popular or not, we can discuss, but one of the recommendations that we were given by another entity was to consider putting security cameras on the outside of the bathroom buildings.
Do what?
Proper security cameras and proper lighting. So that could be an alternative too.
Okay, Ms. Somerville, Ms. Simmons, and Mr. Moore.
Okay, well, I would like to take this opportunity to say that this Parks and Recreation Department idea with the director and making park bathrooms available, we should also be tying in harm reduction, like education and collaboration. We live in Washington County. We are a resource-rich county with nonprofits that care deeply about harm reduction. I still think people who have substance abuse issues need places to use the restroom. What they decide to do inside that space is, you know, their decision. I think the only thing that we can do and hope to do is provide harm reduction services as part of this broad idea to reinstate a Parks and Rec, active Parks and Rec department. And this all ties into public safety. This all ties into all the issues that we're dealing with in all different parts of our city with violence. We can't keep neglecting good resources into our community and then also complain about nuisances. If you want, I won't even say that somebody who has I'm not gonna say that somebody who has a substance abuse issue is a nuisance to the community, because I don't think they are. But if people continue to suggest that and say that we can't have nice things, and we can't continue to improve our parks because these things exist everywhere in this country. So I think harm reduction should absolutely be a part of this conversation. It shouldn't be a reason not to do something.
Hey, Ms. Simmons.
Yeah, so Steve, I mean, I'm a cynic too, Steve, so I guess this would, I mean, but right, I'm with you, Annie, too, in that, you know, I guess I'm hoping to make better use of these resources, and it's gonna take a leap of faith, I guess, a little bit, and then maybe we can be a little smarter in how we manage it, so that we, you know, kind of, you know, reduce, I guess, any potential to start, you know, whatever, things that can go wrong there. But I think, again, that's where I think maybe if we try this as a pilot, when thinking about parks, that to me, off the top of my head, that would make sense maybe for this would be maybe like Park Ridge, Rec Park, Candy Cane, and then maybe Riverside and Prospect. I guess, again, thinking about Spencer Park, you know, that seems something to delay, right, until we kind of figure out what's going on next with that. But I guess I appreciate at the very least that we did the porta potties, you know, as something, as, you know, and we could continue doing those and maybe the other parks, but yeah, I don't know. So I'm just trying to think of, you know, where the middle ground is, and trying to find a solution and maybe giving it a try and seeing what we can do with this.
Mr. Moore.
I do believe everything that different people said has weight, and just like the defacing of the Black Lives Matter thing, just like the Elijah McCoy thing every year, things that are put up in the city will be destroyed due to a few people who enjoy destroying stuff for the majority. So these things won't escape us. However, it's our job to create deterrence. And I do think Mr. Aker said, having some cameras, whether they're on or not, cameras and lighting are deterrents. Posted signs about what's available, what's not. We have to be creative, and just because that group of people, whoever, doesn't value the property, doesn't mean the rest of the 20,000 citizens should have to suffer. So I do think, according to Mr. Brian Jones-Chance, we still have to recur again and again and again and again, try to do something that works for the majority, even though these things will exist. But I do appreciate the cynicism of my colleague. Pessimism, okay. I stand corrected. The pessimism of my colleague, because these things will happen, and being a step ahead, having some locking mechanisms. Again, overnight, that's what you're saying, that they were left to their own devices overnight. So these things we're smart enough as a group to offset some of these things. But again, the things that we can't, which is human behavior, we can't foresee what people will do, but we do have the right to provide the best we can for our citizens. So I'm all in for what that looks like.
And rather than pessimism, I would rather say realism. Okay. Because it is real. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. So I just want to echo a couple things that I've heard and add some different verbiage. Everyone deserves dignity and respect despite their obstacles. And so, again, I think going along with what Councilmember Morgan said, Councilmember Somerville has said about, folks deserve to have those spaces as human beings to utilize, and we have beautiful parks, and people should be able to be there and enjoy them to the fullest extent. And also, those who have different obstacles should be able to have spaces that are safe and clean. And I think the thing that it makes me think about more is, how do we get creative around some of these other pieces? Councilman Morgan just said, I don't know how I feel about cameras, but I do value better lighting. How do we figure out how to get staffing around those spaces more frequently, so that there is a presence and that the upkeep is maintained to keep them clean? I think that should be the focal point of our conversations, and how do we figure that out rather than what the barriers could be? Because again, everyone deserves to be able to have facilities despite whatever they may bring with them. And if somebody destroys it, well, you know what, that happens, and it's gonna happen everywhere. But the thing that came to mind for me as someone who, I work in mental health, I work in substance use, like dignity and respect for all to me is the utmost. And to me, this is a dignity and respect issue in our community on top of an enjoyment and like leisurely issue as well. But at the bottom line, this is a public health issue actually, that we need to have facilities available for our constituents to utilize in the community. And I'm looking at you, but I know that you're listening to what we're saying, but I'm talking to all of my counterparts as well, that like the barrier should not be the conversation piece. We should be trying to find solutions to make sure this can happen.
I would just like to say that I do believe, as I mentioned earlier, I believe that we need the bathrooms open. And I also recognize that a lot of what Mr. Wilcoxon was saying is real. We experienced it before where I was on council where bathrooms were totally destroyed. I mean, where fixtures were pulled out of the wall or the toilets pulled up out of the floor. And repairs that just weren't, that's why they're in the shape that they're in now. The city wasn't able to make those repairs. However, I do believe that we need to look for solutions on how to make the bathrooms unavailable when those kinds of things would happen. And that would mean, I believe, if we open the bathrooms while there were 4 scheduled events and close them at night, because at night, that was when we found lots of the destructive activity happened was at night. And I don't know that we actually have a time that our parks close, but definitely if we have the bathrooms that they would close when the parks close, that they would not be left open. So I think that we would need to work towards a way that we could actually have our bathrooms and have them safe also and provide for everyone. I too believe that everyone should be treated and has the right to dignity. And if the bathroom is needed, it's needed. I also feel that if we're not going to open the bathrooms at times, that we also need to have porta potties available. So that there is always some place that a person can relieve themselves. Ms. Somerville.
2 things. I just want to make sure, I guess, if I wouldn't like to go towards the route of only having bathrooms open for special events, because I guess in my head, like especially large special events, they should still be required to supply porta potties. Like I'm thinking like Beer Fest, like whatever, all these big festivals that happen, because that would obviously be too strenuous on the 1 bathroom facility or the 2 bathrooms. Secondly, just back to like the timeframes of when they would be open. Obviously, I think that can vary on like the time of the year and natural lighting outside. But I also think relying on community volunteers and even like, I mean, as a council person, I would be willing to make sure that the bathroom gets locked at night in my ward. So I think like thinking creatively might seem crazy, but I think it's totally reasonable to volunteer like yourself as a ward representative to make sure bathrooms locked at night if that's what it takes to have bathrooms. I would be willing to do it.
Mr. Jones-Chan.
Yeah, and I second that the bathroom I think should be open when the parks are open for those reasons, and I don't think it should be open just for people who are paying.
Yeah.
I don't feel like it's a privilege. The other thing, we just get less mileage for the dollars we spend on repairing them if we only use them on a limited basis. And I think there are a lot of volunteers, a lot of community members, at least in my ward, who would definitely be willing both at Rec Park and at Park Ridge to volunteer to, keep the bathrooms closed. I don't know how you know, I don't know how DPS like deputizes citizens to lock bathrooms or whatever, you know, maybe like a quick training or something like that. But I think we can find people to do it, and I think if we have that sort of buy-in, people will be even more interested in maintaining it, more interested in, you know, being vigilant of the parks. And maybe now that we've gone this period without them, people will, you know, appreciate, you know, that they're back. And I don't know, I feel like this could be a nice community building sort of a thing, at least initially. And when things deteriorate, we can take it from there. But I think we should resolve to open them and keep them open. And going forward, just do whatever we have to do to make sure that things that we began providing, we continue to provide, whatever the obstacles are. Because at some point, the residents paid for these bathrooms and they should get them.
Mr. Akers, in your preparation and all, have you reached out to other municipalities surrounding around us, or, you know, maybe literally not just surrounding us, but to see how they handle their bathrooms in their parks?
We spoke to Washtenaw County regarding their parks and facilities. That's where we've gotten some of the recommendation information. I do know other municipalities that I've worked for do have seasonal staff who works, you know, after close of business, so they might work till dusk or 8 or 9 p.m. at night.
You say they close them after the close of business? You said?
Well, no, they would have seasonal staff who worked after the close of
Oh,
business.
okay.
So if they did have an open bathroom, it would be shut down at the time the park shuts down. That here is a little bit of a different challenge because of our collective bargaining agreements. We have to make some adjustments in order to accommodate that. But that's certainly an option.
All right, seeing no hand, oh, Mr. Wilcox.
Oh, I played the Bestman's card and brought out a lot of things that hadn't been discussed at this point. That's kind of why I said it, but one of the immediate problems that we have is people defecating on the streets downtown. Doing this in the parks, and people talking about not having Riverside Park be one of the parks that gets it first. To me, that was the obvious first place to start. And like all people live downtown, that's the closest park in proximity. But looking at these alternative designs and you know, trying to figure out how we can have restrooms within the downtown area that can be useful, so that when those things do happen, there's absolutely no excuse. People are talking about having, you know, the transit center open again. You know, that puts the issue firmly on the place of the transit center, and those people are not taking the bus anywhere; they're just there. You know, I've talked with local business owners about what they've seen down on Washington Street, and you know, then talked with staff about when we had Port Johns, you know, across from the transit center, and they got so disgusting that the company didn't even want to deal with it. So, you know, that ended because people abused it, right? So in some way, you know, I'd like to see a public bathroom, but question of how we take care of that so that it's feasible to have that be a sustained function. Right. More than just parks, and that particular issue has been escalating for years. So I'd like to address that as well.
Thank you. Mr. Jones-Chan.
I feel like we're getting close again. So it seems like everyone's for bathrooms. But I take Mr. Wilcoxon's point about ongoing maintenance, but I think maybe if we could sort of commit that we're gonna have this amenity, I think that does a lot to help us figure out as we encounter problems, how we're gonna solve them, if we just resolve now that we will solve them, which I think a lot of what happened before is we just sort of gave up. And if the majority of the issues were happening at night, that doesn't mean that they will in the future. Then, then maybe we've mitigated a big part of this by locking them in the parking spots, parks closed, bathrooms closed. I think that's fair. And I don't know much about the situation at the transit center. I know a little bit about, the alley restrooms in downtown. And I also know that one of my businesses is basically the Frog Island bathroom. And occasionally people, shoot up in there, but we've got some things to keep people safe, and we've got, Narcan under the register if we need it. And it's never really a huge problem. So I think but that's again, because we have a commitment to that it won't become a problem. So I think if we resolve now that we're going to keep providing the amenity, I think that goes a long way to sort of keep our resolve up as we encounter problems. But I feel like we're sort of on the same page that we should have the bathrooms, right?
Ms. Somerville.
Yeah, and another little plug, because Brian just made a good point. We can get resources like Narcan resources, and we could have those located throughout the park. One of the public libraries in Ann Arbor just recently installed a free vending machine for people to dispense those items from, and there's lots of community programs that already offer those items for free. And again, it would just go into some harm reduction support that we could provide as a city through agencies that are already doing this and have supplies that they could give to us.
Okay, thank you. And seeing no other hands, could we, and Mr. Akers, I think had to excuse himself for a moment. Could we go on to the Parks Department discussion?
That was Ron's presentation. I'll get it going. There's water in the break room as well.
At least the person who's are exactly what we are.
What's that about?
We started doing it a while ago. I can't remember.
I don't know what it was.
I don't know how it started.
It was a PowerPoint presentation and I was trying to signal to Andrew how to change slides, so.
Yeah.
Yes, the tradition continues.
Yes, it's fun. In high school, our mascot was the Eagles.
Give me a sec here.
So let's briefly rehash what we've gone over once the technical issues are here.
Yeah, we're good.
Next slide, please. Oh, he's got nice slide transitions. Definitely better than mine. So again, we're going to have an overview of the existing operations, specifically also the public services operations, a financial overview, a rehash of the goals that we've already discussed tonight, some community comparisons to other parks and recreation departments and other communities that either have them or do not have them, and then move on to options to consider. Next slide, please. So currently, this is how things are structured. The Parks and Recreation Commission advises the mayor and city council and advises staff. Staff are directed by, thank goodness.
Excuse me.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Got one less long.
I know, it's like, oh my God, somebody go find out.
Okay, we had moved on to the.
Yeah, we're at the existing
Department
park
discussion,
staff. Are you a
park
second?
discussion.
We're on slide 3.
Excuse me, just bear with me one.
Veronica, we go into the things that we didn't talk about.
Yes.
So we can,
So Bonnie, their project manager Westler went over all this information. Thank you. So we can go ahead and skip to slide 5.
5 or 6.
5.
Okay.
So we had seen this slide before. The only thing that I wanted to highlight from the slide is when we looked at Parks and Recreation Services, one of the things that kind of consistently came up was, just kind of a divided responsibilities between recreation programming, administration, and parks maintenance. So I just keep those 3 things in mind as we move forward. Next slide, please. So one of the things we've done in the Department of Public Services over the last 9 months is we made some adjustments to some of our internal responsibilities, which have been focused on changing the way we perform parks maintenance to address resident concerns regarding grass, sidewalk, snow removal, and other parks maintenance. These started with changing our general foreman responsibilities. Previously, the division of labor for our 2 general foremen where one supervised the roads division and the other supervised our environmental and parks and facilities divisions. In order to, equalize the workload and shift focus more towards park maintenance, we assigned our environmental operations to our roads foreman and limited the focus of our other general foreman just to parks and facilities. In addition to this, we've assigned 4 equipment operators to our parks division to bolster our staffing. We also shifted some of our job responsibilities around so that the parks division cuts the grass and road margins, which was previously handled by our roads division. And the parks division will be providing abatement, grass cutting, and snow removal, which was previously handled by an outside contractor. We also reset our expectations for the timeframes for grass cutting and sidewalk snow removal. And while these changes are still new, we have been noticing fewer resident complaints from late summer until now. Next slide, please. Oh. So there's our operational chart that kind of shows where staffing is allocated on the maintenance side of our operations. Next slide, please. We've already talked about parks revenue, so we can continue to slide. Apologize, a lot of the stuff we've already talked about. So, so let's go to slide 14, please.
Which, is that slide 14 in your?
Yeah.
document?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
I'm trying to find it in mine, I'm like, it's gonna be 100 and something.
So part of the presentation, we went over the parks plan, but just to kind of summarize some of the findings from it. Most of the objectives of the plan, survey comments, items identified, parks and rec visioning session. We're focused on maintenance or physical improvements to the parks. The administrative focus that was identified in the plan is to coordinate with outside entities to provide recreational, outside groups to provide recreational amenities and encourage volunteerism. They did discuss talking about creating a volunteer manager in the plan, or creating a new position which merges the volunteer manager with special events. And then there was some discussion about marketing communication strategies, as we had indicated. We recently hired a communications manager. So one of the things that we did and wanted to do as part of this was look at some comparable communities for some of the Parks and Rec department operations. So we looked at 6 communities, which are comparable to the city in various ways, be it located within Washington County, population size, SED, having universities within them, et cetera. What we want to do is highlight some of the structure of these departments and identify some of their differences. While they all do some different things, I do want the council to keep in mind the 3 main areas as we discussed with administration, recreation programming, and parks maintenance. So the first community we looked at was Adrian. They have a separate parks and recreation department where they have a parks and recreation director who's responsible for programming, as well as overall administrative responsibility for the department. Their parks maintenance division is actually within their department, not public works. They also administer cemeteries.
That's so strange.
Their parks maintenance group also does forestry work, which is different from a number of other communities. So Adrian does not manage a senior center. From the website, it does appear that they don't manage any other community centers and buildings. There is a senior center in Adrian, but it's ran by the county. So their department provides programming, administration, and maintenance all combined into one. Next slide, please. So the next group that we looked at was the City of Ann Arbor. They are a much larger organization and have a variety of administrators within the Parks Direct unit that manage many different amenities and facilities. Parks maintenance is under the city's Public Works unit and does have their own division. Next slide, please. So it is difficult to do a direct comparison with Ann Arbor due to their size and scope difference, but essentially their Parks and Rec unit does administrative programming, and the maintenance is handled out of Public Works, which is a separate department. Next slide, please. The next community we took a look at was Ferndale. They do have a separate department with the director and deputy director providing admin. And they have program specialists which administer the recreational program. The parks maintenance is handled within the Public Works department. And as the summary, their Parks and Recreation Department again handles administration programming, and Public Works handles maintenance. Next slide, please. Next community look at was Mount Pleasant. Mount Pleasant has a separate recreation department and a separate parks and public spaces department, excuse me. These departments are organized under a larger community service department, which includes economic development. As you may have guessed, the Parks and Public Spaces Department does parks maintenance, and Recreation Department runs the recreational programming. Both groups use seasonal staff as well to help accomplish these tasks. In this situation, the administrative aspect of it is handled partially within those two departments, partially at a higher level. Maintenance is so they're separate departments. It should also be noted that both departments actually share an office professional employee. So there is some likelihood, I didn't get a chance to contact them, but there is some likelihood they're probably housed within the same area. Next slide, please. The next community we looked at was Wyandotte. So Wyandotte has a recreation, leisure, and cultural affairs department, which is comprised of a recreation superintendent who manages programming for parks, and community senior center, their golf course and ice arena. And then there is a director of museums and cultural affairs, which runs their museum, and special events is jointly run between the two. They report to a recreation commission and their finance and administration department within the city. And parks maintenance is handled by the city's Public Works department. So administration is handled by both groups within the department. Programming is also handled by both, and parks maintenance is handled by DPW. Next slide, please. We looked at the city of Wayne next. The city of Wayne actually in 2015 closed their recreation center and laid off all their Parks and Rec department staff. So currently what they're doing is the Public Works provides basic park maintenance, and they have a Parks and Trails Committee, which is a volunteer group who works with DPW to make trails improvements. It wasn't really clear who's handling admin or any program responsibilities, if there were any, but I do know that Public Works provide maintenance, and they did sell their community center to a group called Hype Athletics, which serves a similar role to what a YMCA does. So they do have other programming within the community that I understand that Hype offers, but I believe there is a membership fee to be a participant. Next slide. So Marquette has a next community looked at was Marquette. They had a director, deputy director, and they manage their own programming. They have parks coordinators, arts and culture managers, senior center coordinator, and their DPW provides maintenance. So again, admin and programming were done by the municipality through Parks Department, and maintenance was handled by Public Works. Next slide. So to summarize some of the community comparisons, there's variety in organizational designs. Most communities surveyed had a separate Parks and Rec department, and a lot of them did provide some of their own programming. It is mixed which department manages parks maintenance, but most of the communities surveyed have parks maintenance handled out of a separate department. Ypsilanti is unique among the survey communities with having our self-sustained nonprofit organizations and community organizations running a lot of the programming within the city-owned facilities. And then based on the review, we found that we offer a lot of the same recreational services. They're just not all direct, the programming is not all directly coming from the city. So next slide. So regarding a Parks and Rec department, I know we've discussed a lot of this already, but the three options we looked at were consolidation or a partial consolidation of services into a singular department. We could look at keeping responsibilities the same, but within their own respective departments and add, staffing or responsibilities to meet goals. And then the last one, we could keep responsibilities in respective departments the same and evaluate what we want to do in the next fiscal year. Initially, I had put down because a lot of the feedback we got in the plans were with regards to parks maintenance. And because we had made some recent changes with regards to parks maintenance, it may be beneficial to wait, but we've already had a little bit more discussion about what council's goals are, excuse me. Next slide. So this is a summary of the presentation. A lot of it's already been discussed, so I won't rehash it. And the next slide is essentially a discussion slide, which highlights what some of the questions that we had regarding the establishment of the Parks and Recreation Department. Specifically what we were trying to accomplish and what our goals were. A lot of these items were discussed on the prior, at the initial presentation that Project Manager Wessler did, but I'm happy to answer any questions and look forward to further discussion.
Thank you very much. Both Mr. Akers and Ms. Wessler and whoever presented before I got here. Right now, are there any questions or comments for Mr. Akers? Is your hand up, Ms. Somerville?
Sure, I guess. I mean, we've had a lot of discussion throughout the presentation, but I think it's pretty clear that we don't have a lot of options with the budget restrictions that we have. So I appreciate Mr. Bassett laying it out at the very beginning. Totally, yeah, unfortunate we are in this current fiscal year and the next. So I don't know. I mean, we have to make a hard. I mean, if we're going to do anything, we need to move money out of the training staff. That's the only solution I see for like even just getting the park bathrooms up.
I'd like to say thank you to Ron and all staff and to all council. We've heard all of the things that you've said. And so I will take this back and share it with staff and try to see if we can come up with something that resembles what we've heard from you today, with various things. There's various ways we can accomplish this. So I will definitely prepare something, just some options, and then you can kind of tweak them, yay, nay. I hear a lot of things going on, and there's a lot of things we can do. We can create a Parks and Rec division with one person being the point person. We can establish the Parks and Recreation page. You know, we need to have conversations with our other satellite buildings and bring them into the conversation of how we can make this work.
I have one other like question / comment,
Mhm.
because it wasn't really talked about at all. Is it possible to have discussions with the county about collaborating with them on our parks? I mean, there's this whole push for equity on the east side of the county, and I feel like investing properly in parks and recreation and Ypsilanti will go a long way when you actually look at equity.
I mean, I can post the question on
Yeah, for example, the county gets the same amount of revenue sharing that we get for cannabis sales. So last year, they got $145,000 because we have facilities. This year, they got $300,000 because we have facilities. I mean, I think we should be asking for some of that to be invested in our community.
Mhm. We do, we do annually get a $10,000. I don't want to say stipend, but an investment from the county for like the senior center, Park Ridge, and I think it's a pool. Yep. Mr. Wilcoxon.
So one of the things in the Sustainability Commission meeting last night, there's a green communities designation. And one of the items in there was to have sustainability committee that's made up of people from all different departments. And rather than having the sustainability department in itself, it was a committee made up of people from other departments. And so the question I asked earlier about how many FTE encompass what goes into the parks and things like that, is you go with a coordinator for this and have them chair a meeting that essentially does the same thing as creating a department. You've got somebody to coordinate all of that, and you've got staff coming together on a bi-weekly or monthly basis to focus on those things and have it all coordinated. Then I think that's a reasonable administrative model for accomplishing what we're trying to do.
Thank you. I believe I hear what you guys are saying. Now it's just time for us, staff, and us to get together, present something to you to try to make it happen. We're about solutions and making it happen. So the consensus is we want bathrooms. We're gonna have bathrooms. In some form. Thank you very much for that, city manager, and thank you to council for all that they've had. Evan, did you have anything as the chair of the Parks and Rec Commission?
Yeah, that's it, a couple things. I won't keep you too
Well,
long, I
please step to the
promise. I think I know most of you. I'm Evan Sweet, by the way. I chair the Parks and Rec Commission. I also work professionally for Canton Township for their Parks and Rec department. They call it leisure services there, but basically Parks and Rec. I just want to say that clearly it's a priority for you all to have increased programming, communication, resources, investment in the park system and the city. And I think that shows by you, right, making it a goal, having this session. I think as a commissioner and someone who works professionally in the field and also as a resident, right, there's a lot of things that play into that for me that are very important too as well. So I think you're definitely on the right path. Obviously funding is an issue, but that's an issue in a lot of communities now, right, for big projects. So, and it's no easy task, as you all know, being here tonight and talking about these things and fleshing them out. As someone who works in the field, it's also no easy task sometimes too, in an established department, and starting it from kind of what the city has now and blending things together, it's different. I think there's also a lot to be said too about making some connections with the township. I know that I've had conversations with them about wanting to do some coordinated mailings of, we have these programs, the services, the community center, the city has the pool, like how do we bring people together, right? Most people don't know, not most, some don't know. I don't live in the city or the township, I live in Ypsilanti. Like, so what that looks like in combining services, there's some potential opportunity for crossover. And also kind of making connections with other folks that work in recreation throughout the county, whether that's county level or there are other townships, Pittsfield, Ann Arbor, or folks that work in Wayne County area too. So if ever that, I know you all have your own connections and everyone's well versed in that, but if I can ever help make those connections too, it's hard for me to jump in and make a comparable to what Canton does, so what Dixie's gonna do, that's not even it's like talking about Ann Arbor to Ypsilanti, right? That's not but there is like best practices that this community might do that could be fit into current budgetary restrictions or current things that the city wants to do, right? So I just applaud you for putting the work in and getting the process and the conversation started. I think it shows a lot about the future investment in the park system. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your work on the commission.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Jacobs or Ms. Abathibika, did you have anything to, last comments, you're fine? Mr. Abathibika, did you have any? No, okay. And Ms. Westler, any closing words for us? No? Okay, thank you. Thanks to all of you for all the work that you do, not just on this, but for continuously, both as staff members and also as just residents and those that are interested in the city. Appreciate council, and with that, we're going to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Mayor, there's one more public comment.
There's one more thing.
One more public comment.
If anyone in the attendees list would like to make a comment, please raise your hand. You'll have 3 minutes to address council.
I forgot people were on virtual.
Seeing no hands raised, if council would like to move forward with the agenda.
And we will have the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.